and welcome to this episode 206 of Frame and Reference. You're about to drop into a conversation between me, Kenny McMillan, and my guest Gareth Paul Cox, DP of The Man in the White Van. Enjoy.
I am a new-ish father, so I have a 9-month-old, and I have been very busy prepping like a proof of concept that shoots in Atlanta next week. So I haven't been watching a tremendous amount, but one of the things my wife and I like to do at the end of our day to decompress once we get our baby to sleep is to watch Elementary. And I don't know if you've ever seen Sherlock Holmes series, and it was a long running series. So we just kind of like veg out and space out to that.
That's a good one.
So nothing, I wouldn't say it's necessarily like, amazing cinema, pushing the boundaries by any means, but it's quite entertaining and it's well shot.
I was going to say, that reminds me, is like everyone who always goes like, oh, it's a guilty pleasure. I'm like, it's only a guilty pleasure if it's like objectively bad. If it's just like something that if you like something, that's not guilty. Like,
right. Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah, I wouldn't have said it's a guilty pleasure. It's just something we just tend to bounce around, and I myself am kind of like a very much a hands-on, just like to be active all the time. So I watch a tremendous amount of YouTube videos on how to do things. So I either get sucked down that path late at night around 10 p.m. or my wife and I get to meet together and watch something that just kind of turn it off, but still be mindful of things, investigative reporting and things like that. And I guess murder mystery and thriller are kind of obviously with this movie, Man in the White Van, it's kind of like right in line with that, albeit very formulaic when it's in a TV series. But I don't think we necessarily like rewrote the book on horror or thrillers. You've obviously seen the movie, but I think we tried to do some things that would be similar to what is kind of like natural for the genre.
Sure.
So it's kind of interesting, Elementary, and just see how like different a series can be and how formulaic it is, and then think about applying that to like a feature.
Sure.
And act that. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. When you're on the YouTube rabbit holes, are they all filmmaking related, or do you? Because I had to bail on filmmaking YouTube. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Actually, none of them are filmmaking specific.
Woodworking for me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I just like to build things. I've been renovating. I renovated this house that we're in here in Florida. No, to answer your question, not a lot of filmic related stuff. It's mostly how to build things. I'm converting a 20-foot open side shipping container into my office and equipment space storage in our driveway right now. So I'm watching a lot of commercial building techniques and, steel studs and steel wiring and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's a lot of how to build something or make something or finish something. But like I was saying, I renovated this almost entirely, this house. Pre-pandemic, I started the project in 2018 as an investment property. And then during the pandemic, decided to really invest my time as opposed to contractors' time. And that's where it all stemmed from. So the last 5 years have just been like, how to do this, how to do that, how to fix things. I rebuilt a DF50 a couple weeks ago that I found on eBay that was like completely beat up, and Real FX hooked it up with some of the parts. And, it's just random things here and there that I just try to find.
What's a DF50?
Oh, like the Hazer DF50, like a Real FX Hazer.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, sorry. I jumped back into kind of film world.
But well, yeah, I don't. If there's haze, it's usually like they got a haze. I've never had to write down the part number for it.
Yeah. Lucky you. Yeah, these are just things I've acquired having done a lot of kind of indie stuff that I just started picking up randomly, buying for some reason just to fix and use. So yeah, it's a problem once you space. Like moving away from LA, I think that was one thing that I realized how much space I could get for a reasonable amount of money. And then I was like, oh, well, now I'm filling it with all this gear. And yeah, it's digressed into something awesome, but a lot of gear.
Yeah. I was just in Spain, like I said, shooting this documentary about this guy who's got the largest collection of English language, like Iranian, Persian, sort of like manuscripts and books, and fiction, nonfiction, all and everything adjacent. And he shows us this massive. He's got like a villa in Spain that's huge, and he's got this massive library. And we are like, "This is cool." And he was like, "Oh yeah, well let's go downstairs." And I went, "What?" And downstairs he had three more libraries,
Oh my
and I was
gosh.
just like,
That's
"This." I was just shocked by how much space I wanted. It's like I could
yeah.
fill this
Yeah.
all with Blu-rays. I could do so much. I want to collect
Right.
books.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. That sounds like a cool trip. Pretty wild. It is nice when you can have that the luxury of space that you know you're not paying necessarily a premium for, and you can kind of acquire. It's also a bad habit though too, right? Because then you start leaning into kind of these I don't know strange obsessions with things where you just need to get whatever how many copies of one thing or whatever it is. But
Speaking of, that guy has over 1,000 copies of the same, not copies, but like versions, editions of the same book. Like there's
oh
one
wow,
very specific, like Persian, like important book that he has. I think he said over 1,000, just one like wall. Um,
yeah. I mean,
you
I
know,
guess at that point you're a collector. So, I mean, I don't know why you would need that many, but cool.
it's history. Like I've always thought, like if I got enough space. Have you ever been to the ASC clubhouse?
hmm Yep.
So you know how they have like some of the like historical cameras on display and stuff.
Yep.
I want to do that. Like I
Yeah.
want to buy
Same with
just for no reason. I want to buy like a red one, you know, not to
right.
use
Right.
dog
Yeah.
shit camera, but just to have it.
Right. Yeah, well, the nostalgia of it all is kind of fun. I mean, just to think in our lifetime how much has changed in the film industry and technology advancing just from the Red One, like this massive weird tubular brick thing that needed ice packs on it to cool it. It's like now we've evolved into the Komodos of the world and this more boxy looking, still strange looking at times, the build forms, but yeah, it is kind of nice. I've actually started doing that to some degree. I regret selling some of my early cameras. Like I had, kind of when I first started out and was able to afford something that was semi-legitimate was like an HVX 200.
I have an XL2
And
still.
oh, nice. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. That's pretty sick. Micro Four Thirds, right?
No,
Yeah.
it was
That was
1/3, 2/3,
one third. Oh, that's right. Yeah, but it
1/3 or
had
two
the
thirds. Yeah,
yeah, that was a cool camera. Yeah, I mean the HVX came out like shortly after that. But yeah, I sold that like a long time ago in LA for nearly nothing. And ironically, the P2 cards in that workflow, I came back to Panasonic and not to necessarily tie it into Man in the White Van, but obviously that's kind of why we're talking. But Man in the White Van, we shot on Panasonic Vericams. And so it's
oh,
P2 card. P2 card express. So they're different. They were a slightly different form factor. They're faster. They have a more robust architecture. But those cards had transcended all those years. It was kind of funny. It was like weird to go back to that. And one of the reasons I'm I'm sure you're curious about this, but one of the reasons I went with that particular camera is Warren and I, the director of Man in the White Van, Warren Skeels, he and I had been shooting a TV show for a long time for MTV, and I was an early adopter of the Panasonic Vericams, kind of along the same timeline as Ozark was using the Vericam for season 1 specifically. I think they switched to Sony for season 2 and everything thereafter.
I believe that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, the Vericam offered us the dual native ISO, and this was before Sony or any other, main manufacturer had really adopted that. Sony had it in their digital SLRs, but they really hadn't adopted it in the cinema world yet. And so I started shooting with that because that show was a docudrama series, and it involved a lot of night shooting. So the dual native 800 and then 5000 at night, we could use the same Cabrio lenses. They were a T29, but we could still, shoot at night and get a decent exposure. And most times was eliminating a lot of the light in the environment because 5000, let's be honest, that's a
Way up
pretty
there.
sensitive. Yeah. So sorry, I digressed on that one.
No, no. I was gonna say the Panasonic has always been before I bought my C500, my Mark II. I was looking at the Vericam 35 because they went on sale for like nothing.
Yeah.
But Panasonic has always been like the first. I have an AF 100. I've never sold a camera. I have an AF 100 when that came out, and they were like on the forefront of,
Right.
I don't want to say digital cinema, in like A21 red, whatever, but or D21 rather, but uh, built-in NDs and shooting to SD cards was like a huge deal. So Panasonic's always been on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And now that it's all kind of under the Lumix family, they kind of got away from the cinema line specifically. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned buying those and they came on sale for so cheap. I did a lot of unscripted stuff and up until like about a year ago, I was still shooting a lot of unscripted stuff as well as scripted and commercial. And now I'm very much transitioning out of that, mostly just into scripted and hopefully continue that. But it's one of those things where I actually purchased the Vericam 35 that we shot Man in the White Van on because at the time the production and I we were quickly in prep. I was shooting a show in Vegas for HBO Max, an unscripted dance competition show, and I was coming straight into Man in the White Van, and we were just trying to figure out what the best platform would be and architecture for our post workflow and everything thereafter. And I just knew that we were going to be limited creatively in some elements of like what we could do on lighting scope and things like that. And we had talked about trying to keep it a little bit more indie. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just look into purchasing this camera. So I bought one off eBay, and it turns out it used to be one of the Claremonts. I
Oh,
guess it
nice.
had gone through an auction and somebody had purchased it because it came in the yellow case. It came with like everything labeled Claremont, which was pretty epic, low hours. And it was like you almost couldn't find a better camera body in the condition and everything else. So it was like we basically had a brand new Vericam 35 to shoot the movie on. And that was our primary camera. And then our secondary camera, which was floating on gimbal, was a Vericam LT, the smaller, version of it without the additional back on it. So yeah.
So besides the price, obviously, and just the familiarity, what were some of those conversations about platform? Because obviously, Alexa probably came up, maybe
Yep.
Red, but you know, was it more just like, this is really convenient and all cameras are good, or was when you're talking about some of that post production stuff, was there like something that really put that ahead for you guys?
Yeah, it's interesting because we didn't have a tremendous amount of VFX in the movie, so it wasn't really like we needed, the Vericam 35 is natively 4K. It wasn't like we needed to be in that space. So we had also talked about, what ARRI camera could we use? Could we use an Alexa? Could we do that? And once we started bidding it out for quotes, this is kind of like the natural progression of it. The most cost effective for what we wanted to do with multiple cameras, but only shooting basically single camera, the movie as a single camera. So it was like, I was operating, so I would take either the A or B camera, given whatever. We didn't have an additional camera team. We didn't have a B camera operator or anything like that, or an A and me filling in the B. So it was really a single camera show, but we wanted to have that gimbal for some shots, and we wanted to do remote head stuff, and we also wanted a camera that we could do for some rigging and things like that. So we knew that we wouldn't necessarily be able to get two Alexas, for example, or something like that, and just have that extra body on set, or an Alexa Mini or something like that, whatever it would be, that would be our gimbal camera. So it was like, well, I'm familiar with this platform. I know the architecture, I know the workflow very well. and we can shoot, pretty quickly with it. Our post team and everyone over through the post pipeline was really cool about it. And one of the things we did here is, we're a 239:1 aspect ratio, but we didn't actually capture anamorphic. We shot spherical and did a center extraction. And I'm sure you could tell from watching the movie that it's not. There's
So
inherent things that are anamorphic about the image, but
I was gonna say literally my very first note was this is clearly spherical. However, there's like random like flares or something where I'm like, did we use a filter? Was that post? What was the deal there? And also what lenses?
yeah. So it was Cook S4s, primed
Classic.
for the majority. Yep, yep. I knew I wanted that contrast, the Cook look, not to be cliche, but the warmer skin tones. We wanted a lot of that. This is kind of a throwback movie, primarily set in the 1970s for Annie's part of the story. But I used glimmer glass. A lot of that is glimmer glass. There was no additional filtration except for polarizer, which is used a lot in the movie as well as in some night photography. I used a polarizer just to take speculars out and things like that. And we can dive into that in a little bit. But we also had an ingenue 30-76 that I was using. And so part of the movie is like this thriller element, this slow burn, and it being a throwback. Warren wanted kind of a contemporary look, right? He didn't want too much in aberrations. He didn't want, barrel distortion. He didn't want kind of like the weirdness, some of the weirdness of older anamorphic lenses. So we made the choice pretty early on, also knowing that we were going to do some very close proximity work and not necessarily want to use diopters or split diopters and allow for that focus to really eliminate some of the breathing that we might feel if we were anamorphic and things like that. So there were like technical reasons for it, but also those led to or were directly influenced by the creative, right? So he knew that he wanted it to feel timeless, but also be kind of nostalgic and a throwback. And so I was like, well, how do we blend those two? Not shooting anamorphic, but getting that feel. Very early on, though, he knew he wanted that widescreen aspect ratio, and he really wanted to play with like where characters could be within it. And I'm not sure we ever really found that language, but I'm not sure we really played into it a tremendous amount. Like there are moments where you feel the frames kind of like breathe a little bit.
Mm.
But the other thing is I've shot features and we've done anamorphic zooms, and we've used them extensively. I think that the thing with the Optimo is we just knew we wanted to do some like slow creeping zooms and just things that just like slowly, very ominously pushed in. And we wanted to let those frames breathe a lot. And I think that was the main reason we went with that 30-76. Um, and that wasn't necessarily, it's not like you can't do that with anamorphic. I think it was just like a different feeling to that lens, right? To
Totally.
do it spherically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely couldn't tell. It's surprising because like with the prevalence of like Alexa footage and just now I can't tell what any lens is shot on unless it's like a fucking Panavision C series or something like that where it's really obvious. But yeah, you definitely created a look that was that I couldn't put my finger on in a good way. Because a lot of times, when I'll watch these things analytically for these interviews, um,
Right.
I'm like just kind of making mental notes of like, oh, clearly this, let's talk about that. But this one, I was just like, you know what, this just looks like its own thing, and that's very cool of you to be able to pull off on a I'm going to assume modest budget.
Modest, yes. Yeah, that's probably a good way to put it. Well, I appreciate that. I really appreciate you watching it and actually, that's how you felt watching it. Because I think then we achieved what we set out to do. And Warren will probably be very happy when I tell him that you said that too, is that, it really was about finding like what I think people think of as the 1970s and what it would look like, if you saw it today, like in our own eyes. And I appreciate that you found the cinematography to be kind of like ambiguous in that way.
Well, I mean,
So you could.
the obviously the camera and the lens choice, whatever, but the lighting especially, it has this beautiful balance between, kind of like sunlit naturalism and like really colorful expressionism. And I was kind of wondering, like, like, were there any references that you were pulling for this? Because I have one that if you say it, I'm gonna laugh. Because if you hadn't seen, I'm sure you've seen the film. But in any case, but also like kind of what were the approaches for, like, there's not too many locations, even though it feels very expansive. If you like skip through it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, there's only. Um, but like in the house, for instance, like the daylight versus nightlight, the way you shaped light outdoors. I was wondering kind of like if there was a generalized approach to those various kind of scenes.
Yeah. I mean, that's
I know it's a lot of like
interesting.
top light and kind of like hair light that a lot of people don't do very much anymore. A lot of big subjects,
Right.
obviously.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because in terms of the film language and what we would have pulled for visual references, there weren't, I wasn't using Shot Deck. I don't even remember if Shot Deck, I think Shot Deck was just coming out. So it might have even been slightly
When did you
before
shoot
because
this?
we shot this in 2022, I want
Oh,
to say. So it's been there were a few hiccups, I will say, in post production that led to it taking longer for it to come out. And just things that needed to be adjusted and crafted and ultimately led to where we are today. But yeah, it was a little bit. Shot Deck would have been around. That would have been around, but it was in its infancy. So I wasn't necessarily pulling the way that I do now for a lot of films. But one thing we looked at was, strangely enough, is like a lot of editorial from the 70s, like print editorial, for wardrobe, but also for color, for light. Um, and I think a lot of those photos blended those two worlds. And mind you, they were shooting on film, so some of it was higher contrast and a little bit different than what we ended up with in the movie. But a lot of it was interesting in tonality. And I think I inherently just picked up on that. It's like a lot of warm tones, and the movie has this progression. And it's not a complicated color progression, but it's warm to cool to warm again, right?
mm.
It's like what a lot of people do. But I kind of leaned into it, and I wanted to lean into like warmth and silkiness to skin tones. And I think that's something I had been playing with from the series that Warren and I had worked on, which was a docudrama series. So I was limited in what I could do, but I would play around with filtration like the polarizer and blending like where specular meets like actual non-specular highlight, or well, we'll just call it like a mid-tone, and blending those two and then using contrast subtly. But a lot of times, like increasing it, we had a telehandler, like Pettibone kind of situation where we'd bring in some negative fill, usually using like black China silks for a lot of the exterior stuff. So I would try to keep it as natural as possible, but also incorporate like contemporary lighting techniques. Um, yeah, our AD was very, very good at helping me schedule, and vice versa. And so we had a lot of conversations, and it seems, again, like in this world of this indie, a lot of things were moving. There were a lot of moving parts. Obviously, we had child actors, we had animals, we had stunts. So there were so many things on any given day that were just kind of moving around. So we would just talk and a lot of times reconvene at lunch and just say, hey, can we shift this a little bit later? Can we slide something in today that we can just pick up? Or can we push this to another day? There's a lot of a lot of that and a lot of meetings with producers and things like that. But to get back to your point, I think what Warren and I really talked about was like this thriller genre, and the references we used there were like older films like Jaws and Conjuring and the Conjuring series, or franchise, I should say, Halloween and Duel, the
There
old
it is.
Spielberg
Fucking
Duel.
knew it was Duel. Fucking
Yeah,
called
yeah.
it. I
And
told you.
the big one I think for Warren too is like, how does this the van become a character in the movie? And how do we portray that? How do we say that it's not, it's supposed to be a symbolic thing, right? We're not really getting into who this real serial killer is too much in this film. It's more Annie's story, and it's her journey and um her being conditioned to kind of feel a very specific way, and in some ways groomed to be a victim. Um,
Right.
and so Duel was like very much a key in what those visual elements would be with the van. So we were that was more thematic to thriller. Like, how can we be more thriller? How can we do some jump scares? How can we do these things? And how can we implement them into Annie's story to be kind of feel natural? Because obviously the cinematography of this movie is a slow burn. We want it to feel, it's not until you get to the end, and then we did, I think, find some contemporary filmmaking. And I experimented with a few things that I'd be interested to see how you feel, like the canting of the camera at times and things like that I kind of played into. And I was like, did I really make the right choice there? It's hard to be uh objective about it when you're kind of in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that those were some of the references. They weren't necessarily for tonality or skin or like that. I think some of that really just from that editorial stuff that we had been exchanging, and Warren's really good at putting together kind of like a lookbook, or I guess he'll call them a lookbook or a deck that has a lot of these images in as we're going into, it's a lot of the pitch material for the movie as he was getting financing for it. And it'll have a lot of that in it. And I think that just gets ingrained in my head. And I'm like, okay, so skin should really feel like this. Cause that's him putting that together without any influence from me. And then I'm like, try to dissect that. Yeah, I know that was a
Yeah.
long-winded answer, but
No, it's hey, people are here to listen to you, not me. Uh, the I literally it was like the third note. I was like dual and just underlined it because it was like the not only the way that you shot the car, but also the sound design is
right.
very like
Right.
dual adjacent.
Yeah.
And so that I'm glad that was the move, and I wasn't just being snooty.
Yeah. You nailed it. You nailed it.
Good
I
for
guess
me.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe we were a little too overt in how we
No, but here's the
how we
thing:
did
when
it.
did Duel come out? 72. Like
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
reference. That's not copying.
Right. Right. Well, and it was perfect for time period, right? Because then we're looking at or feeling like what that media was around that time period, which was, yeah, stuff like that.
100%. I did want to ask, speaking of cars, there's one shot where the whole family's in the car, and it's like
Yeah.
this massive move that goes from one side all the way around to the other. How the fuck did you pull that? Was that like a Russian arm, or like what was that?
That's our Scorpio 23. So we had I will say the benefit of having a Scorpio on the entire movie. It was a
Mm,
deal that was our key grip and his company and what he had available to him and on hand. And so we had a Scorpio, which is like such a treat, right? Just to have this tool, especially when we're doing single camera and we need to get like over here and over here and a lot of natural daylight settings. It was like, okay, we're doing this side. Okay, quickly, I'd put the base in the center and we just telescope out. We get the other side. There was a lot of that. And then it's like, okay, we need a dolly shot here. So for that particular shot, it was the Scorpio 23 on a camera car, and then we had the car on a process trailer, and minimal lighting. We didn't have a huge lighting package for this. I think I just took I don't even think we couldn't fit much in front of the hood, and I definitely didn't want to throw a camera shadow. So for the most part, that was natural. I think I threw something up just to push in a little bit, and I want to say I've got some photos and I could look back at them, and we could clarify. But I want to say I just put something small that was just mostly to push into the car, and I also didn't want to illuminate the everyone in the front because we also have the kids in the back. But the advantage of those cars, like from that era, was they had like massive windows on 360 degrees basically. And so I was like, well,
And
let's just
no
put all the
pillars.
right pillars. Yeah, full pillarless, pretty sick, very slick cars. So process trailer, and then it was a single move, and we had, I think our run was 2 miles out and 2 miles back. So it was a 4 mile round trip on a straight road. And we had to also coordinate the van in the background because that's not a VFX shot. So it's not complete in any way. And it was just getting that timing. And I think we were also up against a little bit of a wind. A storm had just come through. We had a rain delay. It was like anything and everything you could throw from Louisiana in the summer, late summer, at us was basically coming at us. So we uh we nailed it. I think it was like the fifth or sixth take, and then we got a couple for safety as we were on our way back. And that's what made the movie. But that's how we did it. And I was just operating actually on a joystick. I didn't have wheels, so I had no inertial wheels or anything like that to control. It was a Ronin on the end.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it
It
was
was
just a
a.
gimbal head.
It was. I say this as a compliment. It was bordering on too flashy. Like it was like as a DP, I was like, all right, buddy. It's like you don't see, there's like maybe a drone shot here, there's a couple, and then there's just this sick fucking move around the thing, and I was like, all right, showing off a
Yeah.
little.
It's funny because on the day it was like, do we cut this? Right. And I was like, we need to push for it. But we're like I think we're 3/4 of the way through filming. And I was like, we got to get something. I feel like we're not getting as much as I'd love for the reel.
Yeah.
But I was like, we have all these oneers in the movie. We had planned the movie to have 3 or 4 different oneers, and the dining room scene at the beginning of the movie, when you meet Sean Astin's business partner, Sean Astin playing Rick. When you meet his business partner, that is actually a oneer. It's a dolly shot that starts outside, very tableau style, of the whole family sitting at the dining room table, and then comes in, goes around behind Sean Astin, and eventually reveals that Annie's there when she chimes in for her story. We ended up not really feeling very good about the oneer after like 5, 7, or 8 takes. So we went in and grabbed some additional coverage, which obviously ended up in the movie and cut it up for timing and made sense. But this was one of those where I was like, I would love to fight for this car moment. And honestly, it took so much from production that I'm so thankful they gave it to us, because it's one of those trailer moments that I think
Right.
really it also in the movie it really sets up that Annie is going to be pursued by this van. So not only was it cool from a cinematic standpoint, but and from what we got to do technically, but I think in the story it was like it's nice to reveal that the van has actually been there the whole time, but the whole family is oblivious to it. But he's already set his sights on Annie. And that was the dynamic. And I was like, we just need to show this in one shot. If we break this shot, then it's like we're kind of just falling into a cutty version of it. So yeah, I did
Well,
fight for that. And it took so much because we had to arm, I think we had to get if I'm not mistaken, we had to get what did we use to get that Scorpio on? We ended up getting a forklift. I think they had to bring a forklift out so we could get the Scorpio onto the camera car, because it's like, we didn't just take the head off. We took the whole thing with the base, put it on there. They strapped it down, and yeah, it was a rig.
yeah. Well, and it's also like I'm a big proponent of, and I don't know if this was just like something that taught us, and I don't know if film schools still like give this advice, but I mentioned it a few times on the show. But like the classic example is following, where Chris Nolan like really fucking dials in the first 15 minutes, so you won't, so you'll believe it's like intentional, so that the rest of the film where he's just handheld running around, like you're like, okay, that's a
Right.
choice. It's one of those things where you get this big sick move and you're like, oh, okay, this is a real movie. Even though
Right.
that's so silly as a filmmaker to think about, but like you do have to kind of lure audiences into trusting you.
Right. Yep. Yep.
There's that my friend Niles just posted this online, but like I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this old video of the Killers playing Mr. Brightside for like the first time,
Mm.
like 2 years before the album came out. And the ententire
Okay.
audience, it's like, oh yeah, and it's like a mini DV clip or maybe the world's oldest phone, but like the entire audience is just like completely disinterested, you know? And
Right.
it's like people don't know when they should trust a musician, a movie, a piece of art until someone tells them, whether it be subconsciously like putting a sick move in or having really great establishing shots or whatever, or whether it be, you know, the radio telling you to listen to it.
Right. Right. No, that's true. That's interesting. Yeah, I've seen that before. This a lot of things were like bands things, but bands were discovered or something like that, where you do see like an audience kind of in shock. They're not quite sure how to feel, you know?
Oh, this video, you can tell people are literally looking around like, is the bar open? Like they were not interested. Granted, they're playing it
Oh,
kind of rough, but yeah.
right, right. Oh, that's funny.
Um,
Dang. Yeah.
you you did mention uh not having a big lighting package, but I really thought you handled the interiors of the home, both daylight and night. But the daylight stuff really looks great. It all looks great, but the daylight stuff. But I was kind of wondering, how were you rigging up the house in a sort of I don't want to say low budget, but if you were limited in your package, how are you handling that kind of nuts and bolts wise?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up because that also reminds me of one of your previous questions where we are talking about like the look, the overall look and kind of the quality of light that hits people. And you mentioned the kind of the backlight, the hair light a lot. Um, I really took inspiration from a lot of the references, like those editorial things, and then obviously some of our actual movie references. And watching them, they have these elements, right? They're kind of like old Hollywood, where you have like, you know, a nice subtle key, but a key, or maybe it's an overt key, like a real in your face key, and then a hair light and things like that. Warren and I, we have a shorthand. We've worked together for well over almost 2 decades at this point, on various different things, a lot of documentaries, a lot of unscripted and then scripted stuff and commercial work. So we've kind of played the gamut. And I think one thing that we really like and Warren really likes is like the freedom to explore the space with the actors. And this being a single camera movie, if we did it again, I would probably push Warren. I myself as the DP would probably say, let's try 2 cameras. Like, let's make that work just so we can get some of these inserts and some of these other things that a lot of ended up getting cut out of the movie. But I'd be like, you know what? I think we can work a 2 shot in here and like get this more dynamic with 2 cameras. And then the other camera can wander off and go search for random things around the house while we shoot single camera. Um, but we did a lot of the grip team was really on top of it. They were able to secure locally in Shreveport, you know, kind of a speed rail, like a pipe dealer. And so we were able to get a lot of different random pipe, and they cut a lot of it down. We ended up doing grids. So it's a lot of on stretchers. So it's a lot of grid stuff in there. And I had them basically on day one. We didn't really get a pre-light day. We went into the house and it was like, let's put a grid up here. Here's where I think our sources will need to be. A lot of it is indirect lighting inside the house, which I'm sure you noticed. It's not necessarily like straight E to face. One thing that I think is probably a benefit in this movie, but also at times can be like it counters what I would normally do commercially, which is I use that ambient lighting and I don't necessarily even augment it with anything. So it's like with the 5000 ISO, I'll get like a stop in the room. I'll balance it out to make it look natural with practicals and things like that. But I won't necessarily find like a key for an actor in any given space. And I think that's why you're feeling a lot of those hair lights and stuff, because a lot of it was like, oh, let's flip the key. But instead of flipping it to the foreground, it was always the background. So it was always far side keying, if you will. But a lot of times they wouldn't necessarily end up catching any of it. So it would just be a hair light. So I'd be like, okay, cool. I mean, it still looks natural in the environment. But a lot of it is like that very strange, sometimes muddy ambient, which we thought, and I still feel this way, but I think it leans into kind of that nostalgic look.
Well,
Now
also just a
there's
very
obviously
70s look. even if we're not talking about like
Yeah.
nostalgia mentally, like it does feel very of the time.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad you say that because, yeah, that's what I was trying to do is like find that balance. Because I think a lot of times I default that to that because I do a lot of, or I did a lot of unscripted, and I was, you have to be very fast. And I use source fours and punch things around and kind of bounce off of things, and mostly far side coming back. And so I would try to find that, but I would end up kind of in the toe or the lower end on our sensor at times. And that's where that 5,000 kind of really saved me. Um, knowing that that's where I was on our scale, like looking at the waveform and the IRE, I would see that I was pretty low. But kind of leaning into that because at times I was like, it's kind of nice to have like a textural, granular feel to it and to almost lose characters at times. Um, Maybe to my own detriment when you watch it, in a very well lit space. But if you're in a dimmed environment, I think the movie really shines well for a lot of those night interiors. So that was kind of the ideology behind that.
Mm.
And then the rigging, the grids, that literally our package was, sufficient for a feature of this size, but it wasn't like we had doubles or triples of a lot of units. And so it was like, we've got a Titan kit. I think we had 8 tubes. It was like, and I had all the control grids for them. So it was like, let's put 6 in this room and 2 in the hallway. And so, my grips and my electrics, they were just running around like literally from each scene, pulling them down, moving to a different room, putting them up. So it was a lot of like leapfrogging at times, but then also just using it for that scene. I would like to say that we had enough that we could pre-light each room as we went into it, but it wasn't that way.
Yeah. Were you obviously you had like a for all the sunlit interiors that I assume that was a unit outside.
So a lot of that was yeah. So you know what I did is I pulled some tungsten units, some 5Ks, and
For like
brought
$10
those.
and a bag of peanuts.
Exactly. I'm like, nobody's using them. Might as well throw them on the truck. I mean, they take up a considerable amount of space, but
Yeah.
we pulled a lot of those out, and Robert Primes and then some of the Robert Primes ASC and then some other mentors as I was going through film school and thereafter and even before had said and when they were teaching us like, sometimes we used to use tungsten units for day interior scenes when you wanted to feel that warmer sun and all that kind of stuff. And I think that just stuck in the back of my mind. And I was like, I've been doing it on other things and commercials, but I was like, let's put the tungsten units outside, blast those through. I think we had some M18s. We ended up bringing on an M40 at one point, just for some of the larger night stuff. Specifically, I think at the Orange Grove, I was able to secure one, but that was like a daytime unit. Our biggest gun on the whole movie was an S360. So I had a Sky Panel 360, which is a nice unit, and we spent a lot of money on that. And I used that like almost exclusively, especially for all the night stuff around the house. That's all the S60 up on a Condor, like up
Oh
on a
wow.
boom lift. And
What about
that
the
was the only unit.
what about the drive-in? Was that I assumed that would have been like a balloon.
No, that was that was the 360.
Oh, all
That
right.
was the 360 on a Condor underslung facing straight down. I think we had a 80 foot or 90 foot, it was like 85-foot arm on that and threw that up. And then the actual projector itself was like the projector because it's actually a digital screen. That's an
Yeah, I
LED
figured.
wall.
Oh wait,
Yeah,
oh it's a
yeah, that
oh I
was
thought it's not a comp.
no, no. Well, no. So it's actual practical. So
Oh.
it's an LED shot practically. This is the thing where we didn't have a lot of VFX in the movie. We did a lot practically. So I used a Joe Lico 800 because I love Licos and I love
Nice.
Joe and combining the two, it's kind of magic. So we use that literally as the projector beam, and I just shot it off to like whichever side we weren't seeing, so they could at least backlight them. We got lucky that the dew point in the area was quite high that night, so I had the beam without having to use any kind of fog because we didn't have a fogger and no
You
tube
hadn't
of
fixed it
death or
yet.
any we hadn't fixed any of that. Exactly. I hadn't That's why I do it now. Honestly, it's like all these situations I've been in where my anxiety peaks, I'm like, I'm just gonna go try and secure one of those so I don't have that problem. Not that the DF50 would be powerful enough to do that at night, but in an open space like that. But anyways, regardless, yeah, that was a practical LED screen. We found a company, I think they were in Shreveport. If not, they were close by in one of the neighboring cities. And we brought them in. It was basically an LED wall built into a truck, and they do like these pop-up drive-ins. And so we brought them in, did that. The art department put like a base for it because we tried to find a real practical drive-in and we couldn't find it. So we built this whole thing across. It was in a field right next to the house that we shot at. And basically they just brought in a food truck and our department dressed some of it, and that's the food trailer is the concession stand, which also doubles as where the projection is coming from. And then yeah, it's an LED screen dimmed to like its lowest level, I think was 25% output. And we just went with it that way, and it became like an actual key element for lighting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I it looked so good that I was like, well, that's probably a comp. I'm just so used to seeing in commercials, the cell phone that's clearly a comp, and
Right.
my brain
Right.
got ahead of me there.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it might have been, where it was comped, I think, possibly the only shot that it was comped is I don't know, it might have been comped just for timing was when they drive in. And I think that was
mm,
because we were trying to get timing on it playing correctly, and we didn't have any pre. And I think they're driving in, and they might have switched that screen out in the wide shot just so that they could get it where they wanted to, because we just had that movie on loop the whole
right.
time.
Gotcha. That might be what I'm thinking of, but it's
Yeah, that might be the moment, but it wasn't. We didn't set it up as like a green screen or anything like that.
right. Well,
It was the
and
actual.
I was going to say the number of VFX people I've spoken to who are like, honestly, if you don't have a VFX supervisor with you, don't even bother with the green screen. It makes it harder.
Right.
Just just throw some marks up. Fucking let us
Right.
roto everything like we're going to have to do anyway.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's kind of their world now. So
I
we'll just
did
roto it.
Yeah. I did want to ask about. Oh wait, real quick. So I said the sun, tungsten sun, whatever. Does that mean that the interiors were all tubes?
No, I did have a couple tungsten units, like some
Hmm.
smaller units, more Richardson units that we put up, like some 150s. I think we had some 300s. I did have a couple light mats. I think I had a little light mat kit. I would just push those to the warmer end. And then I would use actual source force, and we would, use some show card, cove it a little bit, shape it, skirt it, whatever. Do a lot of that. But there are a lot of tubes in there. A lot of the night interior stuff is tubes. And if I could hide, I think I had an S60. If I remember, yeah, I think I had one S60 as well. So we would put that in, and that would be like the main unit. And obviously that took the longest with the weight to rig and do everything. But yeah, but yeah, that was basically it. It's pretty lean and mean.
But yeah, I'm always cautious to be like, oh, new technology. But recently, like the advancements of LEDs have made me go like, you know what, they're great. And then someone will show me something shot with tungstens, and I'm like, fuck, it still looks great. I should be.
Right.
I never have a generator. I'm always having to run off house power, so it's like how much, I'm
Yeah.
not an
Yeah.
electrician. I'm not about to start like, you know,
Right.
just hoping for the
Right.
best.
Yep. And yeah, it is nice when you can work in some tungsten, I think, especially for a film like this where, that would have been like the main light source other than actual daylight on day
Yeah.
interiors. And we did
Well,
have some bulbs that we replaced, obviously. So we had some RGB bulbs put in all the units.
um, similar on that note though, like a lot of the night stuff, especially when the horror sort of kicks in. Although I guess I wouldn't call it, this is a thriller, not a horror film. But the color really starts to get worse with a lot of greens, stuff like that. Was there kind of a was that like that's what our night looks like, or were you kind of ramping up the emotion with more? I would assume RGB, but I don't know what you were doing there. Was there a methodology to that, or is that just what night was supposed to look
It,
like?
No, there was a methodology. It was as the man in the van gets closer to Annie, that we were going to start incorporating more and more green in the blue. So I think I really, if you could see the LUTs that I built in prep, they were like pretty heavy on the blue at night. And I also, what I would do is I would typically just run it at like 6500. And I say I'm referring to the 360 that was up on the Condor. And I would just run it at 6500, and then my LUT just like peaked the blue a little bit more. And so the moonlight was very much like a blue ambient moonlight. And then as the serial killer, the man in the van, got closer, it really was to start to add green and make it a more of a muddy blue. And then it was a blue. And I think what happened is we also did some reshoots. We had a couple different versions of reshoots. And I'll say versions because some had principal cast, others had none, others had like victims. So we ran short a little bit on our schedule just due to weather and some other things that happened in Shreveport. So we picked up actually months later after editorial, we started picking up some of these scenes that we had to cut that weren't vital to Annie's story and principal cast. And especially like our main cast. And so we went and shot some of the victim scenes, and it was just little pieces here and there that we just didn't have time for in the main schedule. And I started pushing more. And so part of what we reshot was actually the end of the movie as well. And I say we reshot because we had a different ending of the movie. We went back. The producing team wanted to craft something else and add some elements, and so we actually went back and reshot a lot of that. And that's when I leaned into it even more because we had already been through the start of color. We were locked and then came back out of the edit. So we had already done a few days of color, so I had seen like what the end was going to look like, and I was like, you know what, I can improve upon what we originally did and kind of streamline it. So I ended up adding more.
Yeah, well, and it's funny you say that because earlier when you were like, it's hard to tell if you're doing things right when you're in it. Like I can't remember who said it. I think it was on the Shitty Rigs podcast, but they were like, every movie should shoot for a week and then take 2 weeks off and then start again because you'll know exactly who's not going to work, what's not, like I truly believe not just for personnel, but just in general, because you just learn immediately everything that's going to stress you out for the next however many months or weeks or whatever it is. Like day
Right.
two.
Right. Yeah. No, that's so true. There's something to that. That would be an amazing luxury if we could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully we as DPs would still be attached.
Yeah,
That's the
right.
other
Then you
here.
get cut. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, well, that didn't work out. But yeah, no, that would be incredible. Yeah, you would figure out a lot, I think, in that, and then reassess. And it's always that prep period that you're just like, on this movie particularly, because I was coming off something. Warren and I had done a soft prep like months prior. I went and shot a show, and then that show ran over an extra week. So I was still shooting when I was supposed to be in Shreveport prepping. And so we really had like a very consolidated, crunched prep period. And it would be nice to have that luxury to just shoot a little bit, press pause, figure out some things. But yeah,
I guess
unfortunately.
technically in on the big side of movies, that is what, camera tests and whatnot are sort of kind of for, but I don't know if anyone at, I was going to say our level, but I'm below your level. I certainly don't get camera test days and a whole crap ton of prep. A lot of production meetings, but not a lot of prep.
Right. Right. Yeah, there are a lot of production meetings. Um, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say you're below my level though. I think we're all kind of in the same crazy pond of what is filmmaking.
Yeah.
But
Well, I haven't shot a feature yet. Shoot a
okay.
good
Well,
few docs. I was the second unit DP for one day on the last Bruce Willis movie.
oh,
A
nice.
friend of mine pulled me on
Wait,
that. So
that Brian Cox.
he shot it. Yeah, yeah. Or no, it was
Oh,
Laffrey.
nice.
I think Laffrey shot it
Oh, okay.
with
Gotcha.
but yeah, it was the Detective Night movies. Detective Night Independence was
Nice. That's awesome.
um but Brandon's rad. I love that guy.
Right,
Um,
Brandon. That's what I meant. I didn't mean Brian. I don't know why I thought Brian.
oh,
Brandon
I
Cox.
heard Brandon anyway. You could have gotten away with it.
Uh,
Um,
okay. Well,
Brian Cox is the actor.
that's right. Yeah. My dyslexia is coming out now. You see,
Oh, dude, I have.
when I'm like through the deep, dark weirdness of my brain.
But I'm also terrible with names. But actually, something funny that did happen. So whenever I get like screeners, I don't look up. I just watch them. And well, a lot of times there's no information out about them anyway because it's a screener. But like off rip, a few minutes in, I was like, oh shit, it's Allie Larder. And I don't know why I remembered her name, but like the last time I saw her was in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and the Resident Evil movies. But I really like her as an
Right.
actress. And then she just popped up and I was like, oh, hell yeah. All right, we're in. And then Sean Astin popped up. I went, this is great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. The cast was awesome. We had a
Yeah.
good time. I mean, they really started to function kind of like a family unit, which was neat. And part of Annie's story is, she kind of isolates, she alienates herself from her own family in a little bit. They stop believing her. Because in that time period, in that community, which is Brooksville, Florida, at that time period, it was a very safe community. These things weren't really happening there, and serial killers, especially ones in white vans, this was kind of the start of that, right? This was the time period in which these things were somewhat starting and becoming more normal, I guess, if you will, normal in the sense of broad understanding that these things exist out there. And they all started to really like find that dynamic. It was cool to watch that in an ensemble cast like this, and really find what makes them unique about this telling this particular story. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, Allie and Sean were great. That was
Yeah,
pretty
you got
cool.
it's really good casting. Well, and just like,
Yeah.
you get Sean Astin in anything, and then there's going to be a whole sea of Lord of the Rings fans that are just going to show up, and one second it hits
Right.
theaters. Um, at the end of the movie, there's like a shit ton of people that are listed. It was this like a Kickstarter deal, or like what's up with the 100 million supporters?
Are you familiar with Legion M? Are you familiar with that production company and how it's
No.
structured? It's a fan-owned production company, I think is their catch line. But that's also like part of the reason that I think all those names are in the credits is Legion M was one of the producing partners on it. And they were definitely there on the ground with us. So I think a lot of their supporters ended up supporting the movie. And I'm not sure on the financial side of it, but I'm pretty sure they could invest in this particular film. And then I think a lot of the names are also the investors in the company.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it's definitely when I saw the movie ended and there was like 10 minutes left. I was like, how long are these credits? And then there's like a whole music video and like a bunch of names. I was like, oh, that's neat.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, that was a lot of that was brought on by Legion M,
Gotcha.
including the part of it, and then some of the music in the movie is original, and so it was a collaboration. I think they pulled in some social media influencers, and they actually scored part of it, or the movie was scored by uh, Scott Thomas Borland, but you know, they put in some tracks and things like that. Some of the original, like when the vinyl plays, I think one of those songs is actually an original song.
Gotcha. Um, I had one of oh yeah. At the end, not the behind the scenes stuff, but there's like B-roll during the credits of like I guess other murders or whatever, just like inserts and stuff. I was wondering just sort of not randomly, but what was that just like, hey, we need to go get some B-roll, or were those just shots that you didn't end up using?
No, those were specifically shot for that credit sequence.
See, that's cool.
And yeah, yeah, yeah. Now Warren has a lot of foresight with that stuff, and he being one of the writers of the film, Sharon Cobb being the other one, co-writer, I should say. they knew very specifically like they wanted these elements because it's based on a true story. It was one of those things where it's like we need to get this footage. It was gonna play, I think, originally a different way in the original iteration of the script. But when they found this new iteration, kind of partially through post, they repurposed some of that footage. So it was originally shot with the intention of being used that way. Maybe not for the credit sequence specifically, but it was supposed to be part of. I'm misremembering, I think. It's been a minute, but it was
Yeah,
definitely, it was either
5 years.
like part of opening sequence. It's been a little while. Opening sequence or the end sequence of the film. I just don't remember it ever saying whether or not it said specifically it would have like credit roll over it. Um, but yeah, I think that's how it came in editorial. They were like, oh, we can push it a little bit further, and then go into like the archival audio clips from that time period, mentioning the murders and this case, and then it kind of dives into that. Some of the FBI agents, one of them's like our AD. It was just like we were shooting one of the victim scenes, and before we were waiting for the sun to set and to get into kind of like a twilight magic hour. And I say waiting, we had like 30 minutes.
Right.
It was like we were just slightly ahead of schedule. So it was like, oh, let's shoot all this stuff right now. Let's get the police car with the light on top. And we knew we wanted to do it that day so we could have all those elements, because we were actually mostly on a field trip that day, shooting in different locations, not our main home base, and which was the house is where primarily the production was based from.
Oh, you got
So we had to.
Did you stay in the house?
No, we didn't stay in the house. It just became like there's a building that's never in the movie, literally across the street from the house before you get to the barn. Like we had to compress that whole space because there's a pretty big, sizable road in between the two, which is in the movie. It's just a 2-lane highway, but the barn is actually pretty far back set on this other lot. And in front of it is an old general store. And so the production team and producers took over that general store because it was all part of the same land deal with whoever the owner was for the location. But they actually like based out of there. So that was our base camp. One side of the house had all of the trailers on it and like the catering area and the catering tents. And yeah, that was primarily while we were in Shreveport where everything took place.
Yeah, it is nice when you can have everything, centralized. I feel like every, regardless of maybe not everyone, but I'm sure very famous people are used to a certain level of, I suppose, hospitality, but certainly on the indie level, like I think everyone kind of gets into it with a similar mindset of like getting together with smart, creative people and staying in that, the second you get out of that mindset for any length of time, you start to like not be in, and it's just more fun if it's all, contained in one area, because then that contains you in one mindset. I think creativity flows better that way versus if you have to drive an hour and a half to set every morning or whatever. Right. It is safer.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, true. True. Yeah. It is nice when you can kind of create that environment. We definitely did have like a logistical thing because that location was actually 30 minutes from our hotels because of where it was. So it was tricky, but most of the time, I think the producers, they just made it their base camp because that was like the main, they could literally be right next to the unit. So they moved their offices from downtown Shreveport out to that shop
within radio distance.
within lunch meeting distance.
Right. Well, yeah. It's a fantastic movie, man. I'm
Thank you.
Really stoked that I was actually sent to screener. I was just talking to someone recently, like companies have been real sketchy with the screeners recently. And it's just like, well, how the fuck what am I supposed to talk? Cause even this one, like in the credits, it was like colorist TBD, music was still in template mode, it was like insert. And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah.
Really? Charles Benang from Light Iron. Wow. Light Iron was our colorist, our final colorist. We started with Ariana Shining Star at Light Iron for the first iteration, and then we finished with Charles. But Light Iron was super supportive. It was pretty killer to get Charles on board, and I think he really helped like hone that last little piece of the film and kind of get some of that silkiness in it. We did a full HDR finish. So
Nice.
we were provided like a lot of luxury in that regard, and I had shot, I'm the kind of DP that I love to protect highlights.
Sure.
Unless like creatively I need to push those highlights outside of the realm of latitude. But in a movie like this, I was like, it all needs to fit in this container because I'd really like to push it around later. And I think, like you said, also from that time period, like something that I think about is like when I look at those films because they were shot on celluloid, they have like a textural quality to them in the highlights and a feel, and you can really kind of feel the medium. So that was part of like the post production process, and through production, obviously knowing that I wanted to finish that way. But
Yeah. Well, and also with film, there's like a limited dynamic range, but in a way that still feels like you can see it. Like, when people talk about like Seven, for instance, being, going through ENR or whatever and having really crushed blacks, it's like, yeah, but you can still see there's still detail there, but it's just like the roll off into the shadows, which is, I feel like maybe it's just because I'm like an amateur colorist, but like it is kind of difficult to mimic that the highlight roll off. You can, once you protect the highlights, you can kind of figure that out. But for some reason, shadows can be tricky.
they're very tricky. I agree with you on that. They can be very tricky. It's funny. It's always a question for me, like how much do I fill in versus like, and how much do I actually light shadows, when we're talking about night scenes. I think that was something really tricky in this movie because we were limited on what we had resources wise. From a big unit standpoint, I know I do a lot of air quotes, but it's like we just didn't have some of the things that I would normally use to do those vast areas. And so when you put the 360 up that high, like sure, we can get light to go deep into the space. But the fall off was pretty quick in some instances.
Mhm.
And yeah, I know the inverse square law, and kind of like obviously it's less so the further away you get, but we were also getting into that world where we're getting into the noise floor of the image. Like,
Right.
sure, we can see back there, but we are like really in the noise floor of this sensor. And it was funny because I was then lighting sometimes with like smaller units closer, pushing in a little bit and trying to like find the balance between that big light that's up there and how much do I push into these shadows to kind of like make them nice and crisp and have some detail there. And I think one scene that really stands out is like when Annie's coming back from the start of her abduction after going through the orange grove, and she's coming around the corner of the barn and finds her horse. It was like, how much do I push into all of these elements that are underneath the roof line? And I'll just say it, like I struggle with that as a DP.
Mhm.
Like there are times when I'm like, I think I'm overlighting this, like I feel like this is too bright, and then I will make the mistake of dropping a double, or well, in nowadays terms, like having someone adjust the iPad and pull
Right.
it down like 30%, 40%, whatever it is, or cut it literally in half or three quarters, and then I'll kick myself later. So it's like now I err on the caution, on the side of being a little bit more cautionary, and sometimes I'll push a little bit more, knowing that in post we're gonna pull some of that out, just to get some of that detail.
You're
But
so
yeah,
right.
that's
That's one of the reasons why I started, especially over the pandemic, like really learning Resolve, like taking all these courses from Dado Balanick or whatever his last name is. Just anyone who was like offering high quality, like people from Company 3 or a Light Iron or whoever, just taking all those courses and trying to figure out like, all right, what do colorists need data wise from DPs? And you're so right.
right.
Like you'll be watching the monitor and it falls off beautifully, but then you get it in the grade and it's like, no, they needed more so they could shape that in post and make it actually look good versus,
Right.
although sometimes what is on the monitor is perfect, but like, yeah, there is something to be said. Well, I guess either way, there's something to be said for safety and there's something to be said for making a choice. But I think
Yeah.
noise floor is noise floor. Like you can't, like, it's not good. It's not good for it to be
Yeah.
noisy.
Yeah,
It's
and I
all
think that was
dynamic range
something I
management. You know, it's just contrast ratios. Just lift everything up. Everything's got so much dynamic range. If you just lift everything, same exact contrast ratio up past the noise floor, bring it down to post, it looks exactly like you want it without looking muddy or icky.
right, which is like the old film technique, right? And is like you would
Yeah.
overexpose it and then print it down, and because you knew a lot of times your highlights would be fine, so you knew your shadows were your problem. It's funny because digital has kind of flipped that, and I am guilty of falling into that because I'm like, well, I can see it, I know it's my LUT. I didn't have the advantage of having a DIT on this. We had a media manager, and so in that regard, it was like I didn't have a second set of eyes really overseeing that. I was watching dailies. We had Post Hub on the daily side, so I was getting dailies. I was watching them. I had my LUTs that I created in prep, which is me on my laptop with my my monitor system. I know what my workflow is, but it's not perfect, and I'm not a colorist, and I know what I want. But I just get us there with like, a primary adjustment. I'm not getting into very complicated adjustments. A lot of times I'm building off a different LUT that I might have created or that was built off of like a stock, like a Kodak stock or a Fujinon stock. And then I'm like adjusting based off that because it gets me into the right realm.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gets tricky in that regard. And you know, Charles, I think, found the subtlety in it. And in those reshoots, I actually overexposed a lot more. I wouldn't say overexposed, but I gave more latitude and more information in my shadows. And we were able to do things like when the serial killer um is standing on the roof and he's just a silhouette. And his whole front side is dark, but we were able to like really crush those blacks. And I was getting a lot of return in that space as well because I think it's a white house. It's like
Yeah.
there was light of everything. And I know the house in the original movie is white, but the double house, because we actually shot that in Sarasota, Florida. A lot of our reshoots were in Sarasota, Florida, and not in Shreveport, not with the practical home. So we doubled another house, and yeah, I was just getting so much return. But because we had all that information, we were just able to like crush a lot of it and really get into some interesting looks that I'm very happy with. It wasn't like too muddy. And I think that's one of the disadvantages. Advantage of dual native ISO, but disadvantage of dual native ISO is a lot of times you'll be like, oh, I have an exposure. I have that information there. And maybe people aren't doing it the way I'm doing it, but this has just been my experience. And so,
That's the way I've found, just through at least, learning from others and trial and error. Is like I literally just had this. I wrote this note down the other day. Like cameras have made people lazy because you have an exposure, and then you end up
right,
getting it in post, and then you have to like build the image again. But like you're saying, like as long as you give the sensor enough, you're not clip. If you have like an A35, you'll never clip, but you give it enough that you're up past the noise floor and your key is solid and snappy, as they used to say. Um, it'll all work out. That's why I still use a meter. I'm still like just they're all like, me and director behind the monitor. I'm still sitting there with a spot meter, just like just keeping an eye on shit. Just I'm like, lean over to the guy, like, give me a little bit more on the side. Okay, no, we're good. We're good. Don't,
right.
because I know if I'm
Yeah,
like
no,
three stops either direction a key, we're probably good.
right. Yeah, that's clutch. And I think it's a good, we'll call it an exercise, but it's good practice to be using a meter. I mean, I insist that my gaffer use a meter, I use a meter, because then you don't need the camera.
Yeah.
In most cases, you need the camera. You can run around with your meter and get, there's a lot of times your pre-lighting spaces limited at times, but your pre-lighting spaces, you need to go in and know whether or not those levels are even going to work for you. Or you're going to say, no, we need to switch that unit out, or this will work, or let's throw a double in it, single, whatever it is.
Honestly, what I'll do a lot of times is I have the old X100. So I'll just have the
Oh,
meter for light, and then I'll use this for framing, or
yeah.
Artemis or whatever. But Artemis on Android is kind of shitty. So, this has like digital zooms on it. Hey, there it is.
There it is, literally on my desk.
Yep. Uh,
Yep. Yeah. Great way to test. I mean, you can literally see kind of where you're going to be at. A lot of times if I'm shooting film, I do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's well, if you're shooting film to have a digital version of it.
dude,
Just for
I'll
quick
tell you,
reference.
uh, for that Spain shoot I was telling you about, I again, everything needed to fit in the backpack. And so I could only really fit my C70, and like even the tripod had to fit in the backpack. It was a tiny little travel tripod. I had one little
Yeah.
balloon light that inflated. Um, and we needed, it was 4 hour long interview. And so I was like, shit, I need a B camp. This sucks. But I had this with me just for I was going to Spain. I'm gonna take, so I was like, you know what? Let's try it. So I just set it up on a fucking ladder, and it only records
Yeah.
10 minutes at a time. I don't know if you've ever tried to shoot video on this thing, but
Never try to shoot.
10-bit 4K DCI 24p. I threw it in Resolve with just a little bit of shifting hues around because obviously the color's not exact.
Right.
Matched perfectly fine with the C70.
Wow.
I
That's
was
awesome.
shocked.
Yeah.
Again,
That's
editorial's going to be
incredible.
pissed at me because they get, 18 10-minute clips, but, hey, extreme low
That's
budget
awesome.
doc.
Yeah. Oh, well
Yeah.
done. I mean, that's resourceful. A lot of that stuff will teach you that. I mean, I came up in the doc world, and I think that's an interesting part of the dynamic of filmmaking, right? Is we're always trying to find solutions. There's never enough. It's kind of the old adage is that we are always searching for more. You could be on something really big and still I've been guilty of that where we have quite a budget, we have quite a few resources, and it's like I just need one more, you know, 18K, and can we do this, and can I build, these crazy fly swatters out these windows, like how much time do we have, how much rigging can we do? um it's never enough, but that's awesome. You can think that way, and you can work and really find quick solutions like that. I mean, I'm sure they'll be happy that they have a B angle, regardless
Oh
of
my
whether or
God.
not editorial. They'll love that they have an additional angle
Well, and I,
creatively.
well, and my anxiety started kicking through the roof when this first answer was like 20 minutes. And I was like, oh, they're going to hate me. They're going to hate me. I got to figure this out. So I like ran downstairs and go, because I actually got that idea from, uh, what's his name? Dan Stoloff, who shot The Boys.
Okay.
He
Yeah.
shot The Boys on Venice. And he said that
Mhm.
they couldn't afford a Rialto. I think it was season one. Couldn't afford a Rialto. So he had his XT3, which this has the stupid little, what is this? The disposable lens, you know.
Oh,
But
nice, nice, nice.
but
Yeah.
I was just goofing with it last night. But he had his XT3, his personal XT3 with him, and anytime they needed like a high angle shot or something where the Venice clearly wouldn't fit, he would just chuck his XT3 up there. And editorial was able to match that with the Venice. They're quick shots or like inserts or whatever, or like but
Yeah.
cameras are good, man.
Yeah.
Like whenever people talk about, oh, what should I get? Like, is this still good in 2025? I'm like, if it was made after 2015, it's good. Even
Right.
2012 in some
Right.
cases. Like,
Right.
have a
Yeah.
script. That's what I want you to focus on.
Right. Right. Work on the storytelling elements. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. No, technology has come so far. We're really getting into this more analogous space in which all these cameras can really blend
Yeah.
together. And I know that as creatives and as artists, hopefully our work will not continue to do that. And like we'll still have separate visions and things like that. But it's funny that the pixel war and everything else is really like the playing field is becoming much more even in terms of what things can do. And I think even with Netflix deciding that the 265 is not Netflix approved at the moment. I don't know if you heard that, but yeah, it like
I
goes
have
to
to.
show like kind of
I don't know. Like the whole Netflix approval thing is so dumb because it literally is only for people who are making Netflix originals. Here's the cameras we'll accept. But if you shoot something on a 265, if Greg Fraser goes and shoots what's that new movie, Project Hail Mary, on a 265, and it gets offered to Netflix, they're gonna fucking buy it. Like
right.
it's not
Yeah.
such a silly
Well,
that
what's
we all.
interesting about it is there's talking about the stitching on it, and
The LF is a
something
stitch sensor.
right, right, yeah. Yeah, it was interesting that people were picking up on that. And I was like, I don't know if that might be a downstream technical issue in like a compression or something like
Maybe.
that.
I will
Might
say I
not
only saw
actually.
the headline, so I didn't look into it.
Right. Yeah. It just caught my eye because I was like, oh, that's interesting that it wouldn't be approved. And then, high end users with high end TVs were complaining about it. And I was like, well, to some degree, maybe it's something in an algorithm that's actually catching it and it's not on the originating format is not the issue. It's somewhere downstream that something's happening to that image. But
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, sorry, I
Yeah.
digressed on that one. But
No,
yeah,
no.
no, these computers are freaking epic for that stuff. A lot of times, I own a Komodo now. um, I never thought
Did
I
you
would
buy
end
it
up
pre or
with a
post price drop?
pre pre,
Yeah.
but I didn't buy it. I got it from a friend of mine, Drew Dawson, who was selling his. Yeah, the post price drop would have been epic. Maybe I'll add a second. I've done some very small indie features recently, and we've needed two small cameras. But even like a Komodo, you throw that on there. We actually, it's funny we bring this up. So we had the Panasonics, and then the Komodo actually did come out in our pickups when we were doing our pickup shots. Because I wanted to get the van driving at both day and night, and I didn't want to have any rolling shutter issues.
I was going to ask
So a
about
lot of
that, the car mount stuff.
yeah, so the car mount stuff is Komodo for some of it, not all of it. We did put an LT on the car, but that was when we were in Shreveport, and I think we only did it for a very little thing. We just couldn't work it in our schedule, so we did a lot of the rigging with a Komodo in Sarasota, Florida, when we were doing pickups.
Yeah, that I don't have any use for a Komodo. It's a cool little camera, whatever. But when they dropped the price on it, I was like, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
it wouldn't hurt to have one.
right. Yeah, nice little 6K global shutter thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was great talking to you. I'm sorry I kept you over a little bit, but it was a fun chat.
How do you do it?
Take care,
All
bro.
right, peace. Take it easy. Bye.
Frame and Reference is an Albot production, produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to frameandrefpod.com and clicking on the Patreon button. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.